Hello, everybody, and welcome to our world today, the Unionist perspective. Today, we have a few topics that start to speak to some very powerful choices across nations in terms of their future leaders, but also in terms of choosing safety and security over some of the gang crime that's happened, that's taking place. So I think for me, the topics for us today just kind of speak to the power of choice and the right to exercise that choice. And so I'm going to ask the team to just highlight for us which topic or which one of the topics stands out most, and we will take our conversation from there.
Hey there. So, obviously, our main story for today is the beginning of the US election campaign. It starts pretty early in the US, but obviously this is a big country. And so before we go into the details of it, I would like to know from you, my American friends, have you kind of followed the campaign? Have you heard of it, and what are your feelings? We won't really go into details just yet, but like your impression of the campaign from now, like a year from the actual vote.
Yeah, it's already been a little bit. It's been unprecedented and crazy, partly because like Donald Trump is the front runner in the presidential election, but he's also the subject of like tons and tons of investigations, and he's like in trials and stuff and everything. And so that's been crazy because that's never really happened before for us. But yeah, so I feel like the general vibe is people are hoping, if they're really opposed to Trump, they're hoping that he can be disqualified from running again. Because even if Donald Trump becomes like a convicted criminal, even if he gets convicted of felonies, he can still run for president and he could still become president. And I don't know what happens if someone's in jail. If someone's in prison, are you just like lifted out of prison and it's put on pause so that you can be president? I don't know, but you can run for president from prison as well. You can be in prison and be a candidate. So I learned that today. So, but I feel like people are, I don't know if it's going to work either, but they're trying to disqualify him with the 14th Amendment, which was put in place after the Civil War, which is saying that in the 14th Amendment, there's the disqualification clause, and it says anybody who participated in rebellion against the United States or gave aid and comfort to rebels against the US cannot ever hold a public office again. But that the intention of that was to keep Confederate government and military officials out of government in the future. So if that were carried forward in some sort of like lawsuit, the case would probably go to the Supreme Court. And based on how the Supreme Court is mostly a conservative majority, and they like to be like originalist, and they like to say like the way the law was intended when it was written is how we should interpret it. I guess we can't know, but I feel like they probably wouldn't say Donald Trump is disqualified because it's because they would be like, this isn't the Civil War. Like he wasn't like leading an army or anything against the US government. So I feel like people are scared and they're grasping at ways to disqualify him. But there are definitely, and then Joe Biden seems to be like definitely the nominee, you know, and Democratic Party has ways to keep anyone else out through their primary system. So they probably would just go with him. But there's some reasons to think that Donald Trump wouldn't win the general election anyway. So I think that's what's happening is people, people fearing Donald Trump, his return. But it seems like, I actually watched a video from the person we talked about last week, Peter Zion, and what he was saying about the prospects of Trump winning. And he was saying that he said it would probably be a washout in favor of Biden, because during the midterm elections, a lot of independent voters who they decide the outcome, because they're not like, oh my gosh, I'm 100% Republican, or oh my gosh, I'm 100% Democrat. They're the swing voters. They were polled in the midterms and said they think Biden's economic policies are hurting them, but they still ended up not voting for candidates aligned with Trump because of not liking Trump and not liking the direction that he's taking the country. So basically, even though he was saying basically in their hearts they would be against Joe Biden, it seems almost certain that they would vote for him because they don't want Donald Trump being, a leader in the country. So I thought that was interesting, but that video was from like 5 months ago. So I just wanted to put that out there and see what you guys felt about it, or if you had any more info you wanted to add.
I just don't want a criminal to be our president. That's how I feel. And I just hope we're smart enough, for the love of God, not to elect this person again. And I really feel like America is like, I feel like we have gotten past that, but we'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah, from what Sage was saying, it feels like a repeat of history. Like, you don't want Trump, but then you're kind of siding with Biden because you have no other choice. And it's not looking good either way. But of course, Biden would be the better choice compared to Trump. And then there's another Republican candidate who, Vivek, I can't pronounce his last name. He is seemingly like Trump, but has more of a stronger value in what he's speaking of, but he's also very much siding with Trump. And so it's not looking like any of the Republican candidates are any better than what Trump is going with and what he stands for. And I kind of watched the GOP debate, and one of the questions was, would you side with Trump even if he was actually being accused and he was guilty of all his charges? And Vivek automatically raised his hand and was like, yeah, I would side with him. And then all the other Republican candidates looked around, saw the applauses that Vivek got, and then they started raising their hands too. So it felt like their intentions and their intentions of what they want to bring to the US is not strong. Rather, they are just trying to look at what's popular and trying to side with that so that they can just win. And it's just not looking good. It's not feeling good. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Nadia, you make it sound like monkey see, monkey do.
Feels like that. Like, how can you do that in national TV? Just look at the other candidates, see their reaction, and then they follow. Like, are we in middle school right now? No.
Yeah, I guess, because a few months ago, they were ready to say that they did not support Trump because of the criminal justice allegations. But I guess it goes back to our weeks-long discussion around the fact that people put more power into a political party instead of their own power, and through their own power, like supporting divine truth, which feels, it feels kind of weird. Feels like kind of like it's a joke, and obviously like people can see it and feel it, and we know it's important to vote, you know, but I think we are starting to understand why so many people get discouraged from voting, with like having such a, you know, weird political scene where it just feels like the leaders are playing around instead of like saying something serious. And I kind of remember it happening with like the second mandate of Emmanuel Macron in France. And we really did celebrate the fact that he won, because it was against like someone from far right and someone from far left. And I guess like even though they were presenting as people with change and like assembling people that felt that they were on the outskirts of society to them, like there was still something that didn't feel good about it. And obviously a lot of them have had like criminal records, and it feels like Macron was the less worse choice, is something that we like to say here. But I do think that underneath all of that, spiritually, we know that we have some type of like polarization between people that are choosing love and choosing separation. And so you're either choosing love or choosing separation, even though sometimes it seems like it may be gray. And that's why people are so unsure about like politics today. You're doing like, you're choosing one of the or the other. And so it seems like Biden, it isn't a great choice for most people, and feels like their economic power has been reduced in the time of his mandate, just like people are not happy with Macron and his management of like national security and people that didn't agree with him and things like that. But the thing is, like, the country is still okay under like either of their mandate. And that's kind of choosing love and choosing to stay in your power as a citizen. Whereas like someone who is announcing change but doesn't have a best intention and is doing so maybe at the cost of suffering of other people or jeopardizing the stability of the country, is pretty much choosing, like, it would feel like it's choosing separation or insanity or both, because it's like at the core the same thing. And it's not so far off from what we're seeing in like Russia and things like that. And a lot of people were siding with Russia at first and saying like, hey, like, he's getting the tag just for being himself, like outrageously himself, and like he's super Russian, yeah, but like Putin is supporting his country. And now we're seeing the insanity, and we're saying like, oh, Russia is divine, but not in the sense that we should side with an insane leader. And I think that's what people are trying to discern right now. It's like the truth of, are we choosing a good leader, not in the sense that they're perfect or that our system would be perfect with them? I hope so, at least. But, you know, are we choosing like an insane leader or someone who is stable? And I think maybe like thinking that someone can just come and save you in a reality where change takes time, like a miraculous person, like a messiah, is not possible. And I think maybe people need to just like ground themselves and say, hey, like, it's not the solution. I think if they start doing that, maybe not through disillusion, but through like very grounded logical thinking, we can arrive at some truth like easier. But for now, like, it just seems like it's an upheaval of politics. But it does seem like people are past the point of just like thinking it's disillusion and we can just like stop voting because we just don't care. I feel like they recognize that it's not for the best, since it's put someone that they really, really, really didn't want to in place for 4 years. And maybe they learned a lesson there, or maybe not, but I think that's my feeling. Like, there's less complacency from the feeling that life is shit and like what good does it do to like just vote? So that's my feeling, and I guess a comparison with like what's happening in France and like the spiritual truth that I feel under it. But like definitely I would like to hear how it sounds and how it feels for you as citizens, who are like really like living it right now.
So something that I think we probably need to just draw in is there's also an election that will be a national election that will be happening in South Africa next year. So like there's almost a conglomeration of the encouragement to start making choices. And we are in a cycle, and we've seen it for a while now, a cycle of countries or the consciousness of countries desiring greater stability. And I feel like a lot of what's happening is like specifically like with you when you're saying that the French people chose somebody that was more middle of the road between the far left and the far right kind of thing. It's just kind of people going back to saying we need a bit more stability. We also need to be sensible that that person's not going to be a savior and not going to solve all the problems, but they're also bringing a greater sense of stabilization. When in South Africa, you find this concept that as debt has grown under the ruling party's govern over the last however many years, there's also the sense of more opposition parties starting to form coalitions so that they have a bigger coalition, or they're going to have the majority if they have more votes in the election. So there's definitely a strong balance between accepting what always happened versus starting to probably find some strange bedfellows to form new alliances for the reason that the opposition needs to become stronger. So you're kind of seeing all of these things, and you see like the Argentinian election where somebody was literally an outlier and people are voting in his direction because he's starting to probably speak to their consciousness a little bit more. And so when you now look at the US election and you see all these candidates, and there's going to be many processes that will probably whittle them down to the forerunners kind of thing, but you do realize that there's always going to be a lot of hotly contested elections happening as we go along the next 2 years. There's going to be significant debates. There's going to be significant highlights of challenges for various political parties as they walk their path or their road to the election. And it's necessary. But what it does is just highlight to us that from the consciousness of people and nations, there's definitely a shift to not just accept what has always been and calling in that change. And yes, some of that change is going to look really good, and some of that change is probably going to take longer to take hold. But for me, it just feels like these choices are highlighting that, again, people are calling for change because we've come out of literally a global farce of COVID and inflation rising and the lack of goods and services and property markets dropping and human rights abuses over the last 4 years where people couldn't move. And, you know, there's just been a lot of things that have come to the fore over these last few years. And people are probably taking more note of what is happening with political parties right now, because they've come out of this cycle of crazy COVID and everything else.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying, Granville, and I also resonate with what you're saying, Yuri. And I kind of want to meet you guys in the middle of that, seeing as South Africa is making more of a groundbreaking choice compared to America right now, and seeing how Argentina and El Salvador is like overlooked for so many years, but they're also making these underdog like changes that we can really, you know, appreciate. I think America right now is kind of in that mellow, stagnant area where they're either like, we're going to make these strong choices, or we're going to kind of move slowly into transition with Biden. Sometimes in the election years, midway through, there comes a candidate and completely changes the whole outlook of things. I'm not sure what will happen within this election, but for what it's looking right now, these underdog countries like Argentina, El Salvador are really leading in examples in how to lead and how to really stand your ground in values that America, I feel, is not taking that stance right now. So, yeah. Sorry.
I do feel like it's maybe more complex than that, but I do understand the feeling, especially because Argentina, maybe you'll see as we talk about it, it's not that great right now, but like I think what you're talking to is that there seems for you that other countries are making more of a definitive statement and choice, and that might be speaking to your frustration around the US, around like, why are we like beating around the bush or things like that. I think other countries do have that as well, but in maybe other ways and other branches of life, or maybe it's showing up in politics as well, but differently. And I guess you gotta have compassion with the US and South Africa as well, and any country in the middle for that matter, because everything that is happening right now is due to like the cultural structure and progression of each of these countries, and we can like there's a lot that maybe needs changing with like US politics. There's a lot that we can also like see from other countries and feel like, oh, it's better, but I can assure you that other countries are looking at other countries as well and say like, oh my gosh, the grass is greener there, that must be good. And I think what we're realizing almost from COVID, like since the cycle of COVID, I guess, is that, hey, maybe it's not like that much better outside, but we can see what's good and apply it to how our country works. And yeah, but like, again, you gotta make that choice. And I don't know if that choice is much apparent for the US now, but I do feel like there's a change. Like it's not 2016 anymore, you know, like we're definitely past that, but there may be a cycle of people like, you know, having questions and around like presidential elections and thinking like it's upheaval and it's an important choice, and there are sensitive matters being you know, addressed through that, like people's lives may be changing and what they support, what they see, what they believe in is on the line for them, or seemingly on the line, because I don't think that would make that much of a change depending on the person that you're elected. And yeah, I guess we're just in a cycle of like, all right, like we gotta make the right choices. But there's also this thing about like all of these upheaval and definitive statements and brutal campaign elections, like they all seem to be coming from, for any countries, through a crisis of like either little crisis in a country or crisis of faith, or both, in the leaders. And it's like, I wonder if we can get past the fact that people are always saying like, this mandate was crap and we need to change it and replace it and, you know, start all over again, you know. And I wonder why we do that as humans, instead of saying like, all right, like, there are things that went good, there are things that went well, how can we change it? Is changing the person actually the solution, or is there a need for like an actual change in terms of like local representatives? Because it's not just presidential, it's not just parties, it's like, what does my local representative do for me? Like, who do I elect in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, as a governor, as a local police chief? Like, and I think people don't really focus on that much. And maybe it's because it's like, again, this feeling that electing one person will change everything for them. And obviously it's out of that frustration and maybe even that despair for some people. And things are not changing. It's just like, feels like it's getting worse and worse. And I understand that, because for a lot of people, like 2023 has been like hard and always harder and harder and harsher and harsher. And we are lucky, I guess, in this community to be experiencing so much joy amidst like other people like experiencing crisis. So yeah, I think the next question would be, how can we bring actual relief and stable, grounded, conscious way of choosing to people, instead of that upheaval of like everything is going to burn and we're going to hell and we need to change all of that, or else we're going to die, you know? Because I don't think like majority of the country is like super into Democrats or like super into Trump and Republicans. I think we're actually in the middle, and they just want to have a good leader, basically, have a good country, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective, because definitely feels more grounded. Because I was thinking like, again Biden, again Trump, like, are you kidding me? But that's probably what we're ready for right now. That's probably what we're calling in, like, as the divine choice of what we are going through, so that we can bring more groundbreaking change. And what you said about compassion, I felt was the key to moving into that change, of like being compassionate of where we're at right now and how we can move forward with it. Yeah, I just felt like this year, these past 2 years of Biden's politics, it's been really not surmountable, not anything like change, but sprinkle of environmental rights, sprinkle of this change, and like, hey, look, I did this. Hey, look, I did this, but not really any like deep change that's been going on. And yeah, I wanted to look at that closer within myself and see like what's really going on within the American people, that we're accepting this, and what is this reflecting on us?
Yeah, I feel like it brings to mind like something that something that we were talking about amongst ourselves, and Jeff mentioned, is the character of a leader is like more important than what party they're with, or like what, you know, like their stated policies, like their character is more important. And I feel like that, like, I think I've read articles that say this, like when you ask people like why they oppose Trump or people affiliated with him. It's because of the character issue. And they're like, we're disturbed by all of this and the allegations. And then there's like some people who have like this, they're part of Trump's like, it's like a cult of personality, really, where you're basically like worshiping someone and almost not deifying them, not making them, but just it's like a cult of personality with him, kind of. And some people are like that and they would vote for him no matter what. But there's some people who just kind of go with their feelings as things shift. And I think as they're seeing more and more things come out about things Trump did that were like immoral, they're just like, I don't agree with that. So, but I feel like that's fortuitous for us because if the US is gonna make progress on like combating climate change too, like the next 4 years, well, 2025 to 2029, like that's right up to like, there's certain like thresholds that scientists say we need to meet or changes we need to make before like 2030. So if it were Trump all the way up till then, you might have like a really different outcome than if it were Biden. But Biden, like you said, Nadia, he's more just like sprinkle of change, like a small seasoning of change to like the same, like, I don't know, steak that has been served for a long time. But it's better than somebody who is really erratic and makes decisions based on like who's loyal to him and yeah, just random whims. So I feel like that's what's happening. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. The way we put it makes me realize that maybe we need to treat this as people just electing other people on the character, the judgments of characters that they see more than anything else. And this kind of reminds me of sales, because it's like people actually value emotion, the thing you present, almost more than the product sometimes. Or the service, like the details of the service, So it's how you present yourself. And I guess, yeah, you have to have a character that appeals to people as well. It's kind of weird, but that's kind of the truth of our system. Granville, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so I was also going to touch on this character thing, because I think it's probably quite important to just consider that in leadership, you will look for characteristics like trust and integrity and responsibility and accountability and probably a bit of a tougher stance in terms of certain political or economic maneuvers. And so I feel like sometimes, because we as people choosing those leaders also make emotional decisions, we might not necessarily appreciate that their policies and practices are in our best interest, because at the time that those decisions are being made, we probably have other challenges from a household expenses point of view, a job creation or job finding point of view, and those kind of things. And so, it's a fine line. Like we know that for the longest time, the charismatic leader was the person that everybody was probably vying to follow. But we also know that sometimes the ball breaker was the person you needed. The person that's going to make the tough call. Sometimes that's what you need. So you have to kind of look at this in relation to what is in our best interest. And our best interest does not always mean only an individual interest. So I think it's going to be an interesting path or roadmap for all of these countries making these decisions right now, because Nadia kind of hit on something that there seems to be significant decisions being made or groundbreaking decisions being made. But sometimes I just feel like those groundbreaking decisions are actually made out of necessity rather than, so it's not by design, it's by default because somebody else has not performed. And so a lot of what we're hearing seems to be, and you touched on it, Joreen, seems to be the sense of the lesser of two evils kind of thing. And you put it very politely in saying the least worst of the worst options, you know, but like at the end of the day, it sounds just like the lesser of two evils. And I feel like that is probably where the healing needs to take place, is that we are not being presented with very many solid options. And so we almost opt for the options that are going to be the least destructive. And that should not be our political agenda for ourselves or our country. It should kind of be who's going to achieve the greatest value for our nation, for our economy. And we also need to sift through the crap, because there are going to be people that will probably tell you what you want to hear, but their ability to deliver on it may be very, very, very limited. So they will have the fabulousness of having the gift of the gab because they've got serious campaign managers. But at the end of the day, if you look at the delivery track record, you have to wonder what they're capable of. Enter stage left little sprinkles of sparkles all over the place. Yes, sounds like sprinkles of sparkles all over the place, but it is still a track record of delivering various components. We might not see how those components fit together to create a new tapestry, but it's still a track record of delivery. And that is where we're sitting in South Africa, that we have had the ANC as the ruling governing party for over 20 years, and there hasn't been there is no significant evidence of delivery. And so you have to now find the coalition that all individually may have delivered little components. But if you put 10 people that have a history of executing on tasks and achieving something together, that's 10 pieces. We just need to find the golden thread in those 10 pieces to say, if they come together, there might be significantly better movement. But the comparison is, again, what is the baseline that they're coming into? Because, you know, sometimes the bar is so low that the least level of effort still looks like significant effort.
That's what I feel with President Emmanuel Macron. It's like a lot of people elected him as the lesser of two evils. And a lot of people are antagonizing him, seemingly on the dumb shit that his government says. But he actually does a lot, and maybe the delivery is not the best, or like it's going to anger a lot of people because people feel like what they acquired from the Republic till now is going to be in jeopardy. But if you look at it in a theoretical way, the policies that it puts in place are actually probably going to work in a certain space. It's difficult to tell because it's really different from a lot of people we had before. And I think maybe that difference is unsettling for people who'd rather maybe have even though they don't like tell it to themselves, I think they'd rather maybe have the good romanticized speeches of people either from the right or from the left. And the guy is like, hey, you may be antagonizing me, but I will still put my policies in place, actually do something. So it's like people are unhappy, but he actually did things. And I don't think they're as bad as we might think, or not the best sometimes. Because like there's a lot of like dumb shit that went before him, but it's not his fault, He's actually trying to correct it, and it's uncomfortable, but it's still here. And yeah, I do feel that. And we live in a weird system. And I guess that speaks to the character of people. I think it's not about agreeing with Macron. I do feel like sometimes it says dumb shit, but it's not like it's on such little things that don't necessarily have to do with politics compared to like actually erratic people. He's so like solid in his character and mental health that it feels like, hey, like the people that are antagonizing him without having questions, it's like, do you actually want change? Are you actually choosing that? I think like a lot of people are revealed in character as well into that. And maybe we doubt because we don't know what the truth is. Maybe we feel like it's just not listening to the people or things like that. But I think in some place it does, just differently from other people. Maybe not in the way that it strikes there it is. Not in the way that it strikes the ego of people. That's it. And so with that, I kind of want to go to Argentina a little bit and to be very, very quick on the summary because there's a lot of things to tell about Argentina. There's a crisis. There's been a crisis for the last 25 years, but it's worse than ever in the sense that the money keeps devaluing, and so everything is like heavy. There's a lot of corruption. Like the money doesn't have like any power anymore, and a lot of people that have a little bit of resources are being like vandalized by other people. It's kind of bad, and there's no access to the external world financially because like the government has suspended the conversion of any other currency to try to stabilize their money. And so people can't buy things actually. Even if virtually you have money, you can't buy things because it's ridiculously like expensive in your country. And you can convert it in dollar to do things. So people try to have alternatives. But yeah, and in that context, like obviously there's a presidential election. So a lot of things are like changing, and obviously like the far right movement is rising, and they won the primary election, which is kind of like a first tour of elections, if we can explain it like that. Yeah, what I'm feeling is that it's weird because like a lot of media don't talk about it, but they're trying to have a vote of people by saying that the government is in place is supporting far left organized crimes that happened during the times of like I guess, coup in like South America and dictators and things like that, even though like the candidate in the opposition is like center left, so not at all supporting these types of things, but it's again like saying that, hey, they're the one that are in power, they're the one that created the crisis, even though like it's been there for 25 years or more. They're the one that supported the genocide of our people. And like, yeah, and like their leader, like the far-right leader, Javier Milei, is super charismatic in the way that he has like literally been trained in how to move, and I guess, yeah, it's charismatic. And so he's the leader in the polls right now. He's the leader in the first tour of the votes. And I don't know, I think it's just the summary, but like having prefaced with like the US election campaign, I think we can see what are the choices of the Argentinian people and how's that gonna go and why they do that. But like there's definitely a play on like the fact that people are super deep into like suffering and poverty right now, and also that they've been for a while. And yeah, that doesn't really feel good to me, but that's what is happening. I feel like there is just like a thing where Argentina is going to come to a head in the surfing, sadly, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if, who knows if like Milei will actually, like the new guy, the far right libertarian guy, if he's actually going to solve the problems of Argentina, because it seems like the problem has basically been the government has kept running out of money to spend on the things that it wants to spend on. So it just keeps printing money. But the more money you print, like if there's more money in the economy than there is goods and services for people to buy and take part in, then that's inflation basically. Because like for businesses, like the cost of everything producing things like can go up, and that can get passed on to consumers too, or consumers can get a lot of like cheap money or easy credit and then just start buying and buying, and then the businesses can't keep up. And that can happen as a result. And so Argentina like hasn't been addressing that. And if they run out of money somehow, even though like since 1958, they've gotten like 22 loans from the International Monetary Fund. And in 2018, they got like $57 billion to help them like pay for what they need to pay for. And it just sounds like this doesn't really make any sense unless the government is like really corrupt and like mismanaging or like pocketing. I haven't read enough into it to get like why this is kept like being such a problem. Because they should be able to take the money that they've been getting and invest it into the country so that they can like, I don't know, increase production and of goods and services and give more value for people to like, spend their money on, and then the stuff to spend money on would outweigh the money that's in the economy. But you know, like something doesn't add up here, and I don't know if Milei will actually change anything. Him saying that he wanted to like make the Argentinian economy use US dollars instead of Argentinian pesos seems like I don't know if it would solve anything, because if the government is still going to be corrupt and mismanage money, it's still, things will still be the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you said it. The problem is it's widely known that corruption is part of Argentinian culture in the financial terms. So everyone that would get wealthy would be involved in corruption. And so you can try to change the economy, you can try to apply the economic rules that we've thought in theory would work to keep the inflation down and have people live better lives. But if anyone is still siphoning into the system for their own corruption, that's not going to work. And the problem is that it's everywhere, even in the poor people, because we're so used to not having much, that part of the economy is on the black market. And if you still continue to go into a crisis, like the black market is going to increase as well. And so we seem to be in some type of unsolvable negative cycle for now. And I don't think that a presidential election is going to change anything about that. But, you know, suffering, financial strain, despair, like it would make people choose anything to try to get out of it. And we can fault them for wanting to try, even though it feels like it would be a step back to like 40 years before in dictator days, or I don't know. But yeah, there's definitely something there, a heavy feeling, because there must be a solution, but it would feel like a big, massive change in culture. And a massive change in culture is not a light thing. And yeah, it's just how I see it.
So interestingly enough, when you mentioned that he's probably one of the more charismatic people that are running for election, it was quite interesting to also note in that article that part of the primary elections is that all adults are almost obligated to vote in their primary elections. And when you look at the election results, it kind of, I mean, it probably adds up to about a 90% split of the, well, it makes up about 90% of the voting population. And it looks like a very even, almost an even split, like literally there's 1 or 2 percentage point differences. So while there's the sense that is the forerunner or front runner, that could easily swing in another direction as well. But what I found interesting was that when you were speaking to the fact that he's obviously trained, one of the things that came out in the article was like he's a rock singer. And so, you know, he would probably have the power to emote in a way that speaks to people and takes them along on a journey. Because let's be honest, what's more romantic than a story in a song? So, you know, you are almost flirting with people's desire for change. But again, it comes down to do you have the capability to deliver on these lofty promises, to dollarize an economy that's already in significant debt is probably going to be a significantly tall order. It's going to be a big ask to literally overhaul the cultural nuances in terms of how acceptable corruption is a tall order. It's a big ask. And you have to ask yourself, does he have the capability to move that needle? And it all comes down to that, because he can't do it by himself. You know, it's going to take a village to change the country. But what happens when that village is divided into 10 factions and they're all fighting amongst each other and with each other because they will not let go of the artifacts and practices around what is culturally acceptable?
Yeah, and speaking of delivering, our last topic can be of El Salvador delivering such a massive change in their country. when it came to dropping down to 59% in murder rates and mobilizing the military in their country so that it's a lot more safer than how it used to be. How do you guys feel about the values this president has instilled and the changes that's been going on?
So I have a question, like, it seems like the drop in crime rates and violence rate is linked to the fact that there's a new leader of a country, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I always felt like Central America had an alternative way of making change. It's pretty interesting, like Costa Rica with environmental and peace policies and things like that. And now El Salvador, who was considered like one of the most violent countries up until recently. It's interesting to see how that alternative change came from a change in leaders this time. So that's just my thought of that. Maybe we can like expand on it. Probably next week. It would be interesting to get deeper into that. But yeah, how do you guys feel?
So again, interestingly enough, you know, when you like that change in leadership, it's like there's like a colloquial term in South Africa that says a new broom sweeps clean. And so you kind of, you know, you just have to kind of put it in perspective and go, it makes sense that he would have probably have needed to overhaul quite a few things, but he probably did it quite quickly, and that's because people were ready for the change. The fact of the matter is, when you call in the change, it will be delivered. But you kind of need to remember how powerful your choice is here. And so, like, I mean, I looked at some of the imagery, and it's just like even the prison guards starting to wear complete facial coverings and things like that, just with their eyes kind of being seen, because again, they used to be the targets of all these kind of syndicates and things like that. So you can just see that there's a strong stance to root out crime, and it appears to be very well supported, which means it's been a call in their consciousness for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting to see whenever any country does really big changes really fast. I think his expansion of military and police funding was brought on by a vote in Congress where I think he like brought the military in or something. The president like ordered the military in to like kind of like force them to approve the funding. And he's kind of just been like not quite autocratic, but he's been kind of like, listen, like this is what we're gonna do, and has incarcerated like 71,000 people. So now they've got those people in their hands, and now they're locked up. And I guess the question is, so this gives Salvadorians the taste of what it's like to have that safety. The question now would be for them to think about, so how do we continue this? Because unless all of those gang members have life sentences and they're set to like die in prison, once they come out of prison, all these rival gangs brought together, while they're in prison, they could bond and form coalitions and try to make an organized effort against the government, and El Salvador could become like a narco state where politics gets infiltrated by the narcos, basically. That hasn't happened, but that's one of the threats. So it seems it's really good right now. They just have to think about what the long term will be, I guess, right? That's the question.
Yeah, but it's interesting that they have now the space to do it. And I think it's a good example for a lot of Western countries, actually, when saying like, hey, like getting more or less funding into the military, or getting all these things that seemingly are like more of a left policy or right policy, in and of itself, it's not going to like make it more dangerous or change your country. It's what the government is going to do about it that is important. And I think that's the lesson for now. Like, we can try to think about it in different ways, how we're going to manage it. Obviously, like it came into my mind too, and it's very interesting. But just the fact that they allow themselves the space to say, like, hey, it's not about parties. It's about like what we need to do now. And it's not about the policy, but it's about what that person is going to do with that policy. It's just very interesting. Yeah.
And on that interesting note, thank you everybody for today's conversation. We have reached our hour. I do agree with Yoreen that we do need to probably explore this topic a little bit further in our next conversation. But also to everybody else who has followed us, please also feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you'll find all our previous live content, and we look forward to seeing all of you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.